Hey guys, my name is Rachael Shek, and I will be sharing about my project, We've Got It All Together. So the reason I phrased it as a question is because I'm trying to draw attention to the fact that we actually don't have it all together. And the fact that we think other people do, but we don't, is the problem that I'm going to address. So from my research and just conversations with people in my life, I've realized that many college students feel symptoms of imposter syndrome. So in short, they feel like they're frauds and being exposed. This has been heightened by social media because we think everyone else knows what they're doing. We think everyone else is accomplishing things, getting internships, jobs. And then we look at ourselves, and if we haven't accomplished these things that we're seeing other people have, we think we're not doing enough. And especially as me and my audience, college students, are transitioning into the real world where we will most likely enter the workforce, there are feelings of insecurity as we prepare for life after graduation, especially during this pandemic, where there are a lot more uncertainties. So my project design and approach was to create a podcast series and an Instagram page to engage with an audience. So I created a currently 5-part series on a podcast that I have that covers a wide range of topics. And I say 5-part currently because I'm continuing to bring people on. So hopefully I'll have more than 5 episodes in the future. And I wanted to speak with a variety of people that could offer insight and encouragement on things like dealing with mental health issues, to going on casual dates, and thoughts on dating at a small Christian college, or having ADHD, or running a small business. So there's a wide variety of topics on my podcast. My approach was to just focus on having real, meaningful, and intentional conversations with every guest that I brought onto my podcast. One thing that I've missed a lot during the pandemic has just been the face-to-face conversations that you have with random people about anything and everything. And I understand why that has lessened during the pandemic, because at the beginning of the pandemic, especially with the concern for health and safety, taking appropriate measures to be extra cautious, there was less face-to-face contact with people. But my hope is that with this podcast series, that my series will allow people to tune in and kind of listen in to those conversations that they might be missing out on. So I have intentionally spoken to people that I believe can bring encouragement and light onto topics that aren't as talked about in social media or aren't as glorified. And I created an Instagram campaign as well to engage with listeners and kind of show them episodes that were coming up. My target audience is college students, because being a college student is a significant period of change and transition, especially graduating seniors. Graduating and moving on into the real world already feels really unstable and unpredictable. And as I said before, that's just heightened during COVID. But besides college students, I believe anyone can listen to my podcast, because anyone can learn something from each episode. And at the end of every episode, I ask, what is one piece of advice that the guests on my podcast, what is one piece of advice that they would give their younger selves? And what is one piece of advice that they live by now? And what people say is very meaningful and shows that everyone is on their own journey to discover themselves. And I think that anyone can take something away from that. So the significance of my project matters to me because I really learned the value in telling stories. So this quote, it's just been something that I've been saying over and over to myself from the beginning of this project. This has been what has fueled my project from the start. And if I made it up, can it be a quote? I guess I'm quoting myself. But what I've been telling myself is, there is value in telling stories, especially the vulnerable ones, because it shows us that we are not alone. So in my time in the Comm Arts department at Gordon College, I realized the importance and the impact that good communication can have. Oftentimes, it's the lack of communication that creates so many of the problems and the divisions we see today. And the lack of certain topics in the media creates insecurities, because something that you may be dealing with is not represented. So you just feel very alone. But I'm trying to share stories that show people that they aren't alone. So now with the pandemic, the communication or how we communicate has changed. Face to face is still possible, but definitely hindered by masks and the fear of potentially spreading disease. So I hope to bring conversations to people who may need these conversations but would otherwise not have them. For example, I have an episode where I get advice and learn life lessons from a convicted murderer in prison who has a very unique experience. He talks about his situation, what he has learned, and so much more. So that's a conversation that I hope will inspire listeners and realize things that so many people take for granted every day, like getting up and grabbing a snack from the fridge. So, yeah, it's not every day that you can hear a life lesson from someone convicted of murder. So that's a unique situation that I hope maybe someone will relate to or will spark or inspire someone to realize to be grateful for what they have and more. I talked to the prisoner just as my friend, which is what he is, and we talk about a wide range of topics. So that's just one example of an episode that I have. Also, as social media continues to become bigger and bigger, and it becomes more and more integrated into society, we are often surrounded by just the best versions of people, which is very, very harmful to our mental well-being. Specifically for me, this has left me struggling with insecurities about my accomplishments or lack thereof, about my looks. And I'm hoping that with this podcast and Instagram to use social media to spread positivity and truth. So through creating this project, I fully realized the value in telling these more vulnerable and open and raw stories that aren't edited and aren't just showing the best of ourselves. So like I said, I created 5 episodes, a 5-part series that is currently ongoing that share the experiences of different people. So the first episode was about mental health, all things mental health. The second was lessons from a convicted murderer. I also talked to the owners of a cat hotel about how they started their small business. I have an episode about life as a girl with ADHD, which is very different from just talking about ADHD in general, because in girls, it goes underdiagnosed and is less represented because girls show ADHD so much different than guys with ADHD. So I thought that was a very important episode specifically. And then I have a more lighthearted episode with a friend from work about weird first dates and then dating in a Christian college. And also just what's normal with dating, because sometimes you see relationships online. You feel like everyone's dating but you. Is it weird to be alone? So we talk about that in this episode. So I also created an Instagram to drive traffic to my podcast and share more information about each episode and kind of let people know when episodes are coming out. So I have an Instagram called Rachel's Universe Pod. So I introduced the series called We've Got It All Together. And then I have a description, and then I introduce myself to my audience. And then each episode that I have has 3 posts. The title post, then a post about the episode, and then just an extra post, either an infographic about something. For example, these are ways that I take care of myself when I am not doing well mentally. Here is the cat hotel episode, a little bit about my guests, and then I have pictures from the cat hotel. And then lessons from a convicted murderer. I have the blurb about what I talk about with Santos, my friend, and then how I got started writing prisoners and information if the audience wants to do that too. And then finally, the ADHD row, this little infographic, which I grabbed from an account that I really like. And then the weird first dates. So I thought I would just share an excerpt from the episode titled All Things Mental Health. And this excerpt is from the end where I ask my guest Lydia about what the advice. Well, you'll hear for yourselves. So to end, I ask every person this question, or like 2 questions. So the first question is, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self, like looking back?
Ooh.
Or not even like advice, I guess advice, but just something you would tell your younger self.
Yeah.
Like a word of encouragement, advice, or yeah.
I would say that you're more than your struggles, and whatever your heart desires, you should follow your heart.
I really like that.
That's what I
Yeah. Okay, and the second question is, what is something that you live by now? It might be the same thing, but maybe there's something a little different.
Yeah.
Like a mantra, maybe.
I would say I live by truth, I think. Being honest. Also just being vulnerable.
Yeah. So to end, I don't want to do that again. Oh no.